a half hour before the Assembly Rules Committee comes together, so what I would like to do is use this time to try to basically meld the ideas that we got from the public hearing, some of which are reflected on this handout that is a compilation of the emails that I received, and try and meld them into the September 20th version. So when we meet with the Rules Committee, we're actually in agreement about what it is our recommendations are. And so what I want to do is start with the comments, and the first person's comments who came in was Carol and
Can I do
Richards.
something non-substantive before we go to substantive?
Certainly.
There's a technical edit, and I thought we corrected it a week ago, but it's, when you're doing the reader board, it's items that have been acted upon rather than adopted. Just
Yes,
that word
that's
adopted
right.
snuck in.
Yeah.
Just tell me what page it is.
And I'll remind you later.
Yeah.
Can I remind you after the meeting?
No.
Oh, you want it now?
No, I'm just saying that if there are, so of the technical amendments that I know about, on page 1, Jim Barnett is a former Assembly member twice. And so,
And this, I printed a new one, has those two technical edits already in it.
Or they
Okay.
are.
okay, and the second
It's on the-
technical
I'd be okay if
amendment.
you also put attorney and a former assembly member, because they don't know what I've been doing for the last 20 years.
Okay, we can add the word esteemed honorable attorney Oscar
Better,
and mucky
better.
muck of
Esquire.
significant.
Yeah,
Very
better, okay,
significant hot
yeah.
stuff.
Genuflection required.
This is getting better each time.
I have the
Okay,
technical
Cheryl
edit,
has
it's on
hers.
page 5,
Page 5,
number 7,
number 7.
line 5.
Page 5.
And it should be.
I'm sorry,
7.
I'm a little slow. Page 5, number 7,
Line 5.
7A, 7B, 7C,
Oh, yeah, 7A.
and read it how you want it to be.
All items that had been acted upon
Instead of adopted.
instead of adopted.
Oh, in case they aren't adopted, yeah.
I'm still looking for it. The
7A.
the Assembly should invest in a reader board in the Assembly meeting room which displays where they are on the agenda. Modeled after electronic boards and airports that would identify the locations of meetings, the identification of issues that have been postponed, all items that had been,
Acted upon.
Instead of adopted.
okay.
And while we're in that section, somebody correctly pointed out it's called the assembly chambers, and not the assembly.
I think that's
meeting.
already, yeah, we covered that one.
No, that's a legit issue that Jim raised in his comments, assembly chambers, right?
Yeah.
So
The
item, the title of item 7 is the assembly chambers.
Oh,
Yeah, and
Is
then,
that what you're meaning?
well, and then it should
In
say.
the first sentence.
In the first sentence, reader board in the assembly meeting room, it should be assembly
Assembly
chambers.
chambers.
Yeah, that's right.
Good.
Very mucky, yes, hi.
Just to point out that the notice for the meeting was yesterday, the public notice for this meeting, and you're doing it again by doing a violation of the open meeting law.
Actually, the agenda, the schedule for this task force was set on the very first meeting of this agenda, of this,
The website-
excuse me.
The website shows posted notice on the website, on the Muni website, and that's yesterday's date. Yesterday's date. That's the posted notice for the public.
Thank you. All right, we got a half hour to go. So let's go to what we're doing is trying to meld the comments into the draft so that by noon we are talking off the same sheet of music with the Assembly Rules Committee. I'm so sorry.
welcome to Thursday.
Feeling pressured.
This is comments from Carolyn Ramsey, not Carolyn Richards.
Get closer though.
I am really, by the time it's over, I'm going to have it. It's really going to be good. Okay. Item number 1, public kiosks, is item 2 as in 2D. Thank you.
That's what introduced about a half a year ago.
Okay. Item 2D is on page 2, item 2D, municipal kiosks should provide the public with free access to the municipal website and the lobby of the assembly chambers And then we say, and in other public meetings, public buildings. Carolyn suggests in the main lobby of City Hall.
I took what Bob said,
I
and he
think-
said we don't want to limit where they put them, and I agree with that, but maybe we should suggest a minimum of amount of them, and City Hall is right next to the bus station, so that allows that transit, and then the library, and I didn't know if anybody had any other ideas.
I
So
thought that was good, I was comfortable with that.
that was the only reason.
If I may, I
Sure.
think that it's important that we stress the one in the assembly chambers. I feel that the more that we add on to this is gonna increase the cost. And we don't wanna sink the ship by trying to put too many things on it. So I think it is probably really important to have one in assembly chambers and then
Consider
maybe
other.
consider the other
Consideration
ones.
for
And I
public
agree, I
buildings.
think City Hall is a great idea. I've heard the cost of these is about $7,000, and I don't think that that cost is in the budget. So I just think that we should want to make sure that
There's
we.
one in Girdwood.
How about
Okay.
Eagle
In a
River?
closet,
But
right?
I think that's great counsel, because we
Yeah.
don't want to build in a reason for it
And
to
to
be
be
turned
shot down, I
down.
agree.
That's the,
I
thank
agree.
you very much.
Okay, so let's, maybe what we read is in the lobby of the assembly chambers, and then read, and possibly in other public buildings such as City Hall. What do you think?
I like it.
And possibly in other public buildings such as City Hall. A building we lease. Okay. Item number 2, the S version being made available in print and online, and that is articulated in the S version, which is on page 4. Item,
Oh, it does say post. Okay, it does say post on the website. Scratch that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Try that.
Okay, it's already
okay,
covered.
item 3, she suggests 3 minutes and 5 minutes for time limits. How do you feel about, how do you feel about that? Anybody disagree with that?
No.
No.
Okay.
I think it makes sense.
4, she likes the idea of no electronic devices allowed on the bench, and Tim Potter suggested kind of softer language saying no personal electronic devices to distinguish between their computers that are in front of them. And my suggestion on that is language like this. Use of personal electronic devices during public hearings is discouraged, as it appears that assembly members are distracted from listening.
Excellent.
That's what you said.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Very diplomatic.
Use of personal electronic devices during public hearings is discouraged, as it appears that assembly members are distracted from listening.
That'd be 9C.
That would be
Yeah.
9C.
Just as a dissenting opinion, says the guy with the laptop open in front of him. I'd rather it just be obvious how much disdain they have for the public contact.
Do not show disdain for the public.
Well, I would not
No,
put
you
it,
just-
I mean, to me, it almost goes to personal behavior, and I wouldn't put it in there.
Really?
I mean,
Oh,
if somebody looks disinterested, the public's gonna draw their own conclusions,
Yeah.
and they should.
But the problem is not enough of the public actually really goes to this stuff enough to see that. But if they're there, they really should be paying attention to who's talking.
Okay, you guys-
It could be that I've
time-
been chastised
time-
myself
time-
a
time-
number of
time.
times, but.
okay.
The only dissenting opinion.
The next item is a dinner break, and we've had several discussions, some say 20 minutes, some say 30 minutes. And we did have a suggestion from a person who said, why don't they just come at 5 o'clock, have dinner, and start the meeting at 5:30?
And I like that very
And I
much.
think that's the
I
best.
do
So
too.
my suggestion is that we put that in as
Let's ask
9.
Amanda.
We talked about that, and I
Huh?
thought Amanda said there was a problem.
Let's ask Amanda.
The assembly meeting is set up to have the consent agenda first. And as you know, items on the consent agenda can be pulled and discussed by members. So that usually runs between 5 and 6. And then by code, it says public hearings and public appearance requests start at 6. So, I mean, the agenda is sort of set up already in that time constraint. And then typically, the way that the assembly does it is they'll go through the consent agenda, they'll take the, if it's at 6, then they'll take the audience, or the public appearance request, excuse me, and then they'll just take their dinner break after that. So they try and schedule it into a place.
You explained that before.
But I don't think it's working.
We knew that.
No, it's not.
Okay,
Doesn't the code actually say in the limits are that the public hearings can't start before 6 o'clock?
Yeah.
So this might actually encourage the assembly to move through the consent agenda and their business stuff a little bit quicker.
You speak up.
But 5:30 and 6. Doesn't
first
mean
of all,
that
we can recommend that they change how they do it. So that, number one. Number two is, if they eat first and start the meeting at 5:30, I think that really, and we say, so you're not leaving people in the lurch. It's really simple.
Very
Go ahead.
negative.
Well, no, I would encourage us to ask them if the code needs to be changed in order to adopt this recommendation, then change the code.
Yeah.
Because it is a constant source of irritation, I can tell you, and I know you guys have gotten this too, people say, do one thing, you know,
Yeah.
cut out the dinner break, and yet we have an understanding that it's not just the assembly. So I'd like to see us make that recommendation, that the meeting, they come,
It's a
they
very
have their dinner at
frustrating-
5 to 5:30, and then kick it off at 5:30.
And of course, they won't come till 5:30, but that's really not our problem. I'm
No.
suggesting to you that we simply say, you don't take a dinner break and disappear for a half hour in the middle.
I used to have working lunches all the time. Why can't they work and eat? I used to be forced into working lunches all the time.
Rules of the
I think
room.
if people are annoyed that people are up there with their cell phone
No,
devices.
at 5, at 5 when they're doing their consent agenda before the public and stuff.
To eat then.
Yeah. I
Madam
used-
Chair, I think we should notice the problem and move on.
Okay, let them deal with it.
Okay,
Let them deal with it.
yes. All right.
I don't know.
I like the
Chris,
5:30
why not
suggestion. We're just
after-
making a suggestion.
Yeah.
It's just an
In your
example.
existing 9C, why don't we just say use of personal electronic devices during, and lengthy dinner breaks before or during public hearings?
That's a good one.
If some of the members are distracted.
Yeah, I think we had pretty specific comments over time that the dinner breaks were a big issue.
Okay.
And I don't want to
I'm getting
suggest that
hungry.
we discourage.
Yeah.
I have to go get the sandwich I ordered.
Theoretically, there's also apples and oranges here that I brought. Okay, so basically, we're going to say, do something about this.
No, we're giving them a
And either eat
recommendation,
them-
doesn't mean they have to follow it.
Right.
Yeah.
Either eat before or make the dinner break really concise.
There you go.
Okay, number 6, she's talking about networking with high school kids along the lines of Mr. Dunsmore's recommendations about having kids handing out agendas, and I think that all folds into principle number, I'm going to number the principles. Right now, they're dots, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Principle number 4 is community forums, but I'm going to make a 5 that says, how do we welcome people to the assembly? Whether that's a person out there, whether that's signage, what we are doing is encouraging people to participate in the government, and we make it
Great
easier.
idea.
And if we can get kids to do this, great. I would think that over time, I had suggested something called a navigator. When you go to the cancer center, you get a navigator who helps you walk through this, and that we have a navigator who says, these are agendas, these are materials, this is the assembly hall, there's the agenda, it's on the board, this is what those words mean.
I think it's a great idea. I think the government teachers will be, especially Stellar, will be
I know
really into
because
this.
Stellar requires every semester that the kids do so many hours of work on political campaigns or in government things.
Great.
And then like the We the People program that we
That's
have in our junior highs and high schools
Yeah.
would be a natural for this.
Exactly.
Great.
That's where I got the AP government thing, because that's.
Service seminar doesn't.
Service
Kids might
seminar, but
actually
yeah.
take an interest in government as a result.
Never go in there again.
Two.
Doesn't always, not always a positive.
Okay, now we're going to Cheryl Richardson's comments, which basically said, the draft looks good, but do you have any other specific comments you want to make having to do with any changes?
No,
you want to
I
make?
thought, I'm very comfortable with where we're at, and especially after last night's testimony. This was just a report I sent out to the ACC email list.
Okay.
Two
One
nights
is,
ago,
whatever it was.
all ran together.
Jim Burnett, item number 1, that the principles apply to school board and other elected and appointed bodies, not just the assembly.
Can we do that?
Well,
Not a charter.
it is not part of what we were asked to do. However, what we can do is we can suggest that they apply, the assembly has the authority to do that, to apply these principles to everybody. And so we can certainly, in our principles, say, we suggest that you apply these. I don't know if they can apply them to the school board, actually.
No,
I
I think when, you could counter by when appropriate.
But I think we can ask them to apply them to every board and commission that they affirm and set up.
It's going to be a huge change in the way they do business, much bigger than the changes we're asking of the assembly. And I would bet $10 or lunch, rather than 10,000, that it has to do with staffing levels. They keep hacking away at the departments, and then we ask them to do all this stuff.
And the other thing too, although the boards and commissions are confirmed by the assembly, they're all appointed by the mayor and run out of the mayor's office. There's just, I think, 3 that the assembly department.
Hi, Elvie, we're meeting before we meet with you to get our ducks in.
Oh,
You're
no,
welcome,
no, no.
you're welcome to be here. You are welcome to be here.
I'll be back, because I was in the room over there and it said 12:05. I'll be back, thank you.
Thank you, you're welcome. Okay, all right, well, we can recommend that it applies to boards and commissions.
As
And-
appropriate.
Yeah, as appropriate, some,
Yeah, I'm not trying to lay on a bunch of new work, it's just that when we had the testimony from a planning and zoning commissioner that they didn't like public testimony, it kind of made me nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, in item 2, Jim suggests that we underscore the use of electronic media to the maximum extent practicable.
And I was just suggesting that after open, accessible, predictable, inclusive, and transparent. You know, my point is just that, you know, we heard, for example, that we're noticing stuff, maybe not perfectly on the internet, but the point is, that gets the word out. We should use the media to the maximum extent practical, save trees.
Okay. And what I can do is add a sentence that says, move us right into the 21st century and use every tool that's available. Whatever that means, because we don't even know all the tools, I mean, I should say.
Sure, I don't even know about
Okay.
Facebook or
But I think
tweeting or
the
all
word
that stuff.
practicable is an excellent word because it folds in the budget piece that Amanda has mentioned. Practicable will allow us that consideration.
Okay, perfect.
Government word.
Number 3, that paragraph 1 should also apply to the school board and other elected appointed officials, meaning that people have to
Does the
have the
Bill of
right
Rights,
to.
doesn't the Bill of Rights apply to everybody who does
It
business?
says municipal ordinance.
You know, I understand the question, I don't know the answer. And that is that you think that.
It guarantees the people
I'm
of
sure if Dennis
Anchorage.
Wheeler was here, he'd have a different opinion, but I'd say, yes, sure. Right, we can, yes. What I'm suggesting is that in item number 1, which is a charter guarantee for the public hearing, maybe we add a sentence that say, we think this should apply to all municipal bodies. Okay, number 4, there was considerable concern about the shall in paragraph 3, and then this is Joelle's, our issue. She's educated us along the process. It was also suggested by Tim that it might be useful to have a 24-hour, a requirement for, if a citizen wants to sign up sheet, that they have to have requested that 24 hours before the hearing to give a heads up to the clerk's office, which I think is a fabulous idea.
Oh yeah, that's great.
And so it's in page 3, item 3E, and to reflect that, I suggest if a member of the public requests the use of a sign-up sheet and notifies the clerk's office 24 hours prior to the hearing. This management tool shall be employed. Now, the question is it a shall or is it something else? I'm with you. I'm just.
I just want to say that if you say may, that's no different than it is now.
So,
Then that would be no change. Right now, it's completely their discretion, and that's how you have no way to know what you're dealing with as a citizen.
Got it. Amanda?
so in code, shall directs that it must be done, whereas may is permissive, which is the difference between using shall and may.
She knows that.
I'm aware of that, and that's exactly the point.
So I'm saying that if we want this to be,
Yes.
then we probably want it shall, even though it
Yeah,
sounds.
I felt that with a 24-hour advance requirement, that would address the situation that
Can you sit over there or push it, because I can't see you.
Yeah.
you could, if you knew you had 1,000 people
I'll
coming,
just move over here.
then there
Thank
would
you.
be a discussion between you and the assembly, with both the chair and the clerk. and they will-
Okay,
how it would
so
happen.
if we, thank you, I'm sorry to push
It's
you
okay,
around.
there's just gonna be other members joining us. so
Thank
it
you
might
very
be
much.
easier if I
But
can-
but if I say.
Okay, is she here? Thank you so much. Thank you, Amanda. I don't want to be pushing you around, it's can't see you. Okay, so if there's concurrence that with the 24-hour prior notice that it's a shall, yes? Okay,
Yes.
terrific. All
And
right,
Actually, I'd also throw in this day and age, you kind of have to specify what you really mean by 24 hours.
Well, and
If it's going to be in advance of the public hearing, does an email at 6 o'clock the night before count?
I'm not going to do that. I mean, here, I hear you.
And I'm thinking we may not want to say 24 hours, but
Terrific.
let's say
Welcome.
with
The reason I said
sufficient
24
advance.
hours is that even
Day before.
if, even that you didn't get it until the next morning at 8 o'clock, at least the clerk had some notice.
Oh,
Hello,
Rather than
welcome.
have that dropped on them at the meeting.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what
Yeah.
he's trying to
He's
do.
trying
I
to-
get that. So in essence, you're saying day of.
So welcome. Mr. Steele, would you like to join us at the table?
Oh, yeah, I'll be closer that way and.
You know, because better to say if I close the business or.
The day prior.
Is that a shall or a may?
close business the day
I heard
before.
shall from Jane, me, and
It'll
Tim.
be-
here, you want to use this one?
That seems fair.
Yeah.
Okay, close the business the day
The day
before.
prior.
There you go.
Thank you.
I just do the same thing with mine.
We didn't have a agenda for anything, we're not that organized today.
Oh, thank you, thanks for your time.
All right, you got it? You have the modifications? Before we sit down to their words, these are comments. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is the municipal task force on the public hearing process, and we've been meeting since June, and we are delighted to have the opportunity to meet with the Rules Committee of the Assembly. This meeting is officially open. Is Jennifer Johnson by any chance on the phone?
I'm online.
Jennifer, welcome, terrific.
I'm sorry I'm not there in person. This is something I planned before we set up this meeting.
Terrific, thank you very much. Mr. Trainee just suggested that we go around the room and let you know who is here. This is Jane Anvik on the task force.
Carolyn Ramsey on the task force.
Tim Potter on the task force.
Tim Steele, something.
Amanda Moser on the task force.
State Training Assembly.
Elvie Gray Jackson.
Jim Barnett on the task force?
Cheryl Richardson, Task Force.
Arla Sturchlowski, Task Force.
Bob Churchill, Task Force.
Andy Holloman, task force.
Joelle Hall, Task Force.
Penny Goodstein, Task Force.
We also have two members of the public. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
This is Lance Bow.
Hi, Lance, welcome. And Eugene Haberman. Terrific. Mr. Chairman and members of the Rules Committee, the Citizens Committee has been meeting since June and have reviewed many of the policies and procedures and ordinances and charter that govern the public hearing process of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly. And we've held 2 public hearings, one on September 3rd, where over 30 people came and 19 people testified, which was a general discussion of how people felt about the public hearing process. And we had a follow-up public hearing on October 1st, following the development of our recommendations, which are before you as dated draft recommendations September 20th. The public hearing on October 1st, we had 19 people who participated in testifying, and we had another 10 people who communicated with us electronically on their ideas about the policies that are before you. The recommendations you have before you are, it's 9 separate points having to do with our interpretation of the charter guarantee, the public notice process, the public hearing process itself. Item number 4 is substitute version of ordinances. Item number 5 is the process for the continuation of a public hearing. Item number 6 is the establishment of a public record for all comments and materials that are sent to assembly members about a particular ordinance or resolution. Item number 7 is the meeting room or the assembly chambers themselves. And item 8 is community council collaboration, and item 9 is assembly presence. Today we presented you with the draft that was prepared for the October 1st public hearing, and we were just going through proposed modifications to that draft based on the task force interpretation of the public hearing on October 1st. So there's an additional piece of paper which has been handed out to those in the room, which are basically the comments that different task force members have advanced for consideration. Jennifer, I sent that to you by email. I have no idea if
Yes,
it got to you.
I've read that.
Terrific. Okay, so with that, we're happy to approach this any way you would like. And what we're hoping for is a discussion that allows us to have some insight about how you feel about some of the recommendations we've made, and if you think we should be altering our language to accommodate a more productive response on the part of the Assembly. We look forward to hearing about that. Our intention is that we will clean up this document relative to the amendments that are suggested from the public hearing and from any insight that you can provide to us today, so that the version that we send to the Assembly is something that the task force and perhaps Rules Committee can concur with.
Madam Chair, just one comment. It's important to note we have not accepted the comments. We've just started to work on those from the public meeting a couple of days ago. So they may or may not result in changes to the September 20th.
Thank you.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Amanda, has it, yes, ma'am?
I just wanted to let folks know that there is a light lunch in the back of the room.
Yay, we have a light lunch in the back of the room.
Sent an email yesterday, I'm not sure if folks got that, so.
Terrific.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman of the Rules Committee. I have a recommendation on how we go through this, and first off, I'd like to thank the committee for your hard work and taking the time out to review this issue. And I appreciate all the emails you've been sending out, and I had an opportunity to read all of them, and I've read this. But I think the process that would work for me, and if you don't agree, Mr. Chairman, let me know, is to go over each point one by one, and then we can offer comments if we have any. I think that would work really well. We have an hour and a half. If we did it in that format.
If we could take about a 2-minute break to go get lunch, then let's do exactly that. If you don't have a problem with it, Madam Chair, let's go through line by line. So with the interviewing, because what I intend to do is have the Rules Committee come together, take this and work up those that we can put into code. Then we'll do those things that I think are just housekeeping. We'll send it to the Assembly. We want to make sure your work gets the attention it needs from the Assembly, because this is to help us as an Assembly work better with the public.
Perfect.
So if you want to have a couple minutes to go get lunch, then would you please go through line by line on this. Jennifer, do you have the time to stay with us, ma'am?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Perfect, well, yes, we'd be happy to go through it line by line, and I think following Penny's earlier characterization, we can have a working lunch, so let's go ahead and start with line 1, and anybody wants to get lunch, go get it and come on back, because we can only have one person talking at a time. So,
Can I make a quick suggestion?
yes, Jennifer.
It seems that this is very well laid out. Instead of line by line, maybe it's like paragraph by paragraph.
Paragraph by paragraph sounds great. Terrific. And well, with that, let's, people who would like to get a sandwich, go ahead and get one. In the meantime, what I would say is the rest of us can at least go through the document. We can start going through the document because it'll take us more than an hour and a half. And I just wanted to be clear that, as Arliss had indicated, we have only gotten through the first page of the comments by the task force with respect to it, so we might be jumping in on top of each other at this point. With that, let's start with on page 1. We have the introduction that says what our process had been, as well as who the members of the task force are. And then we have principles. And I want you to know that the principles right now are dots, and what we intend to do is to number them so people can refer to them. So the dots will turn into number 1, 2, 3, 4, and we have some additional principles as a result of the public hearing that we would like to suggest. And one is that we would like so principle number 1 is that the purpose of the public hearing process is to solicit the views, knowledge, and ideas of community members to help to shape government action. Number 2, the process should be open, accessible, predictable, inclusive, and transparent. And we have added the word practicable. So it should be inclusive, transparent, and practicable. Item number 3 is the articulation of the information and values of community members enhances the development of public policy in Anchorage. We think it's a good thing that we have interaction between the public and the elected officials. Principle number 4, the discussion of controversial issues with the community in public forums prior to assembly introduction is desirable because it expands the pool of problem-solving skills focused on the issues.
I have a question here.
Yes, ma'am.
I like this fourth one, but and I'm just, are you thinking of community forums? Are you thinking of what?
You're breaking up a little bit. There was a lot of discussion about if there was more community forums, either communication. Let's just put the word collaboration on the table. That the process of talking about issues before they actually arrive at the assembly, so that particularly complex, such as Title 21, or particularly challenging, where there are differences of opinion, such as civil rights, or differences of perspective, that there actually be community opportunity to engage prior to the time when you are facing a decision. And that the more communication that can occur through a variety of ways, the better off we are. There were several people who commented that they were hoping that there could be some kinds of informal conversations with community councils. There could be some kind of informal, there were young people who said maybe there could be chat lines about particular topics so that assembly members can hear different perspectives. But that the notion was the less surprised people are about an issue, the more potential there is for dialogue as opposed to conflict. Anybody else who wants to jump in? Joelle Hall?
Part of this is born out of the notion that when the public is coming to testify on a version of something, it's actually not a dialogue. We're offering an opinion about something that you are going to be making a decision about, and it isn't, unless you kind of get clever in the public testimony task force, it's actually not a dialogue at all. It's, I talk, and you have limited ability to ask questions. And it feels a little bit like you're up against, the way that it comes, that it's born in its decision-making process, right? It's born ready to go make a decision about, and that there isn't a function within this government structure to have any kind of pre-conversation before you're forced to push the button. And that it could be like the work session format could be something that could be expanded to include the public, not by invitation, but by something a little bit more collaborative. Maybe it's the community councils, maybe it's some way to have a dialogue about an issue before you're having a public testimony about an issue, because those are different things.
It was my feeling in the charter that was the community councils, that was what they were striving for, and maybe what we need to do is just expand that with technology.
I'd just like to respond quickly, and that is that we have a whole section on increased collaboration with community councils, but there were many people who articulated that we should use every electronic vehicle that's available to us to participate in this collaboration. So whether that's Facebook or chat lines or things, we should avail ourselves of those technologies. We have comments from
It was LB and
LB and
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Rules Committee was established initially with this Citizens Task Force recommendations in mind, but we were successful in getting our chairman to make the Rules Committee a standing committee. And I've asked Amanda to make copies of our mission statement so everybody can see it, because I doubt if anybody's seen it other than our chair. Anyway, the rules, this last comment, discussion on controversial issues, that's going to be a function of the Rules Committee. And when you get a copy of our mission statement, you'll see. And I'm really excited about the Rules Committee being in place, because we're going to be able to have that type of forum with the public before it gets on the floor of the Assembly chambers. And I'm just really happy and excited about it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
thank you, LB. Bob Churchill.
Very, very quickly, my impression is this piece about the task force and the more collaborative processes prior to the product coming forward, is that it's much easier to change at that point. It's much easier to have meaningful dialogue, much easier for people from organizations to come in and participate, rather than the 3 minutes and just offering a thumbs up, thumbs down piece. And when in fact it might net result be for a more smooth, quicker process at the assembly. That was my impression.
Any other discussion about the first 4 principles? We will offer, it has been offered that we also consider a 5th principle, which is that these principles should apply to all municipal boards and commissions as possible, so that it's not just the assembly, for example, that would have the requirement to have an agenda that has both a number of an item but also the title, but that other boards and commissions, when they put their agendas out, would actually articulate what it is they're going to be doing at those, and that those agendas are available online, for example. And the same would be true for other boards and commissions. And then the 6th possible, yes, Dick?
Madam Chair, keep in mind one thing too, where we have another branch of government, the executive branch,
Right.
who in many cases will have a full-blown ordinance ready to go. We get it on the pre-agenda, then 2 weeks later we have to deal with it. So this is nice if we're dealing with assembly-driven issues, but administrative-driven issues, we have an input on what they're bringing forward to us.
I understand, and I want to respond simply by saying that you do control the timing of what you do at the assembly. So if they give you a complex ordinance, then our goal is that you go, wow, this is complex. Let's take some time to make sure that everybody understands it, even though it wasn't of your making. you have the responsibility for the disposition of that. So we're just saying that once it gets to you, you have the opportunity to slow it down and create an opportunity for communication and understanding and collaboration.
I think that's great, and I appreciate that. I would go back in history. We can take OKO 37. It was dropped onto us and told us we had to pass it in 2 weeks, or the world was going to come to an end. But that's subject to public debate. Once the public gets to vote on it.
I understand.
But thank you.
The principles say, make sure everybody's had a chance to be able to understand what's going on. I want to mention one other principle that I would like to propose, which is on my piece of paper we haven't gotten to yet. Go ahead, Bill.
The elephant of
Jim
the room.
Barnett.
Hi, this is Jim. The elephant of the room here is this ordinance, this labor ordinance, and some members of the task force participated in that process, but I just want to assure most of the assembly that while we've heard a lot about it as a task force in the public discussion, most of us didn't participate in that, and so we're trying to give you some general principles and not try to be motivated just by what apparently was a breakdown in the 37 situation.
I want to mention one other possible principle, which is having to do with the tone of our conversation with one another. And my recommendation is that we have a sixth principle that says mutual respect and corresponding behavior is the code of conduct for members of the public and for public officials. And this is a notion that everybody on both sides of a conversation is coming with mutual respect. There were people last night, or Tuesday night, who testified it would be important for people to not come in with a judgment about, an assumption about what somebody's motives are. And that was on both sides of the house. Now, I don't know if you can legislate that, but the notion was, come to the conversation with an open mind and an open heart from both sides. And that it was Dennis Wheeler who said, maybe a code of conduct would be appropriate for the public as well as for public officials. So I'm suggesting to you that what we talk about is mutual respect and corresponding behavior is the code of conduct for members of the public and public officials in public hearings. So nobody's calling anybody names and nobody's raising their voice if possible. Anyway, with that, we're going to go to item number 1. We're on page 2, item 1, which is based on our meetings and the public hearings, and we'll add the public hearing on October 1st to this discussion. Item number 1, the charter guarantees for a public hearing. The first paragraph quotes the charter. The second paragraph says the task force members consider this provision to mean the assembly has a duty to conduct its business only after maximizing public participation, regardless of the complexity, emotionality, or volume of community expression. And the third paragraph says that we recommend that once a public hearing is started, that all people who come to testify should be afforded an opportunity to testify. We believe a public hearing cannot be ended by a vote of the assembly while people who came to testify and/or signed up to testify are present. If the assembly runs out of time to hear all people who have come to and/or signed up to testify, the task force recommends the hearing should be continued to a future date-specific meeting. Any comments about our first item? Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just think it's a no-brainer. Frankly. And I'll tell you, we can codify this, and I think that we should. And let me take it a step further. I think that every recommendation that we're able to put in code, we need to do that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Trady?
Ma'am, I think everything that you've written down here is already in code. We just need to embrace the code. Somebody should not cut off public testimony. If we have to meet another day, then you simply meet another day and get it done. You should never leave the dais with people hanging on to testimony. It's not the way to do business. Thank you for doing that.
Jim Barnett?
We received some legal guidance, and I won't identify the source of the legal guidance, but it suggested that somehow Bill of Rights of Anchorage is just part of our promise under the American Constitution. And I guess I would suggest that when you're discussing this with the Assembly, that you make it clear to them that the charter, we consider the charter a separate obligation that's different than the American Constitution. So in other words, everything the American Constitution promises you get. Everything the Alaska Constitution promises you get. But the charter, and particularly its Bill of Rights, is something that's binding on the Assembly, separate from the constitutional provisions. So people need to know what's in the charter
I want
if they run for office.
Thank you. I want everyone to know that we solicited the input of Dennis Wheeler, the municipal attorney, and Julia Tucker, the assembly attorney. Mr. Wheeler wrote, and I sent that out, and I can make sure that the Rules Committee has copies. I thought I had, but maybe not, of what Mr. Wheeler had written. And I think it's really important that it's real transparent that we have different opinions about this issue, and that after we received Mr. Wheeler's opinion, which was that we are not required by the charter to do so, that we said, thank you for your opinion. We actually modified our language to say, okay, we recommend. This is our interpretation, and we recommend. And so I just want to articulate that we received that information. We asked for the information, we received it, and our consideration is that once you've started a public hearing, you should continue it. Jennifer, do you have any comments that you'd like to add on that?
No, thank you.
Okey-doke. L.B. Gray Jackson.
Really quick, Madam Chair, and thank you. And that's why I made a statement about putting in code this, because if it's in the municipal code, then it's law, and we have to follow it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Andy Holman and then Kenny Gottstein. Andy?
And this goes more to what Ms. Jackson said, and not so much our primary missions, but I would say it does need to be in code, because obviously there was discussion. And as to what Mr. Barnett said, my interpretation has always been that you went by the charter unless it was somehow in conflict with state law, state constitution, U.S. Constitution, or federal law. What we're seeing in the AO 37 pursuit is going out and getting interpretations from different places, different states, about how to interpret our charter. And that mystifies me in reading the legal pleadings. And this is what the municipality is arguing, that other people have done it this way in other states, and that's going to guide us. And I find it confusing, because it seems to me like the charter should be the primary thing, unless there's a conflict. I mean, if it's conflicted with the Constitution, I want the Constitution to win. But quite frankly, I don't care how they do it in Kansas. That seems to have somehow entered into the conversation in a weird way. I don't know that you actually have to state that explicitly, I guess, except I would say, I guess you do. That in addition to stating explicitly that a public hearing can't be closed by a motion, that somewhere you need to state that our charter comes first as a guide for city government, unless it is in clear conflict with a document that has supremacy over it.
Mr. Trainee?
Madam Chair, you know, when we swear our oath, when we get sworn into the Assembly, we swear to uphold the charter. And we need to remind ourselves of that periodically. That's the Anchorage Charter, it's not the charter of Topeka, Kansas.
Okay, moving right along. Sorry, Penny, I apologize.
Just a real quick comment is that I think it's important what Mr. Wheeler said, because he's trying to make legal precedent. He acted as if the Constitution was the limit on what happens, and our charter can go beyond the Constitution. We have to give people what the Constitution requires. But he acted as if this is what the Constitution says. Everyone doesn't get to testify in the United States, so therefore we don't. Well, we can extend it more than. We can do more than the Constitution requires. I just think it's important, since he's the legal person, that we keep that in mind, because that's our argument against what he's saying.
Thank you.
We have lots of attorneys to give us opinions, we don't have to follow their advice, okay? That's the reason there's another attorney coming down the street, you get another opinion.
Thank you. Any other additional comments on item number 1? Okay, we'll move on to item number 2, which is the public notice of proposed assembly actions. In the first item, it says the agenda of the assembly meeting and the title of the ordinances should accompany the number of the ordinance and the resolution. We are amending this to suggest that there'll be another sentence that said the agenda of all boards and commissions should be available on the municipal websites with the content of what they're going to be doing. So we'd like your agenda to have both the number and the title of the item, as well as all boards and commissions to have the same thing.
And this is particularly online, right, Jane? Because in the agenda, on the agenda we get at the meeting, that is included, but it is not the case online. It's just the number.
Amanda?
To clarify, in the public notice site and on the assembly calendar, it's just the number, but the agenda online has the titles and the links with the full documents.
We'll work on that.
Yeah, it's just hard to navigate.
The object of this recommendation is that people have a clue when they bump into the agenda, either if it's public notice or online, what those numbers refer to, so that they actually have words that go along with the numbers, even in the public notice. Because this is the public notice section. Any other comments about that? Item B, that we'd like you to have your website be more user-friendly. We've had many, many, many comments about this where people got lost, and they would love to be able to say, if you want to testify on this thing, click here and write in your comments. That kind of user-friendly nature would be what they would hope to be able to achieve. And I just wanted to mention, one of our goals in setting up the schedule for the task force was that we would actually give recommendations to you as you started your conversation about the budget. So our goal is that you actually, it's our intention that we formally convey this to the Assembly next week, and that it corresponds with your consideration of the budget. So if it's going to cost some money to improve the website, that's what we are encouraging you to consider. And I know that the clerk's office in particular has worked extensively to try and make things as user-friendly as possible, but there's still room for opportunity for expansion. The one notion, the simple notion, was that if you clicked on the item on the agenda, you should automatically be able to click into the language of the ordinance, and that those are simple connections that should be able to be made. Item C is that we should explain on the top of the agenda what the rules are and the procedures are for coming to the Assembly. It was noted that the Planning and Zoning Commission has that on their agenda. This is what's going to happen here tonight, and this is what you can expect, and that we should actually have the rules articulated on the agenda for the Assembly as well. Item D is that municipal kiosks should provide the public with free access to the municipal website in the lobby of the Assembly chambers and possibly in other public buildings such as the lobby of City Hall. Mr.
Going
Trade.
back to C, how would you feel if we put a placard as you come into the, where the thing is on the wall for the old governors? If we had a placard on there that just listed how to testify, you think that would help?
That would definitely help. That would not replace the recommendation, because that might not, you'd have to physically be there to be able to see that. And if you had a clue what the rules are, like public hearings start at 6, there's always audience participation at the end of the agenda. If you come to testify, you have 3 minutes. People could look at that online and make a decision about coming to the Assembly chamber as well. So, but I definitely think having rules printed on the outside is a really good idea.
Thank you, ma'am.
And there may just be a separate sheet that says, this is what's going to happen. And it's mostly to provide, if you can imagine what it's like for the first time somebody comes to the Assembly Hall and what it looks like and what kind of information they need to be able to know what to do. That's even the, I walk into the building and I don't even know which way to turn. There's a theater on the right side and there's a library upstairs and oh, it's over there on the left. So I'm just saying, user-friendly guidance to the public. Elvie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think one of the things that we also need to do and be really clear on is the process for the consent agenda. Because most folks don't understand how it works. They're there for an item that's on a consent agenda and they end up staying for 2 hours, not realizing that it's all done and over with, nobody had any questions, they can go home. And so we need to make somehow that process.
Walmart last Tuesday?
Yeah, the consent agenda process clear to our citizens, how it works. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And item C says, it should include instructions on how the consent agenda works, how ordinances are introduced and public hearings are scheduled, how appearance requests and audience participation work, and the time limit for public hearings. Amanda?
And one other item that we have further in here is a reader board, which also we thought would address some concerns with the consent agenda to show items that pass unanimously with the consent agenda. So if you were, for example, Walmart, you would walk in, you would see the reader board, you would see your item, and you would see that it already passed.
Perfect.
Is the reader board, is the reader board that big white screen?
No, we want to put a reader board
don't have
outside the
one.
Assembly chambers.
Oh.
This is a new idea.
I didn't even notice it, but the big white screen had a couple of words that were unintelligible the whole time we were there Tuesday night, and I didn't understand why we needed that.
That was the lowest bidder that did that one.
And typically, those reader boards have the title of the agenda item that's being discussed, but we just had the one public testimony, so.
But I know what you want, Katie.
Jennifer, the proposal about the reader board is something akin to what you would see in an airport. It says, this is where we are, this is what's been disposed of, this is what's been canceled, this is what's been moved. So that people have a clue where you are, and that also be available on the TV screen so that you know what agenda item you're on. Tim Potter.
Through the chair, again, it's a reminder to the chair of the assembly as well, that, and some chairs do it better than others, that when you get through the consent agenda and you have those items that are pulled, that's a great opportunity for the assembly chair to indicate to the public that these items that have not been now called out have all passed. If you were here for those, you can go home if you'd like. And that, 10 seconds, that's it. But
Some chairs do it better than others, but we'll bring that up to you.
Okay, item 2D is the notion that there could be a municipal kiosk where our new and improved municipal website would provide easy access to people outside the Assembly chambers. The intention is that there are some people who may not have access to computers, and that we should be able to provide that since it's a convenient way for people to be able to be linked. And possibly with budgetary constraints, that might be available in other public buildings such as here in City Hall or other places, but that it's free and accessible. We backed off making sure you had a free printer to go with it. So I just wanted to know, I think we did back off from other goofy ideas we had.
Madam Chair, you could have the kiosk set up with agenda on there so you can push the button to print it. But once that item's already dealt with on the assembly, it locks it out from being printed.
Oh.
So you couldn't have somebody come in at the meeting and then want to print everything above where you're at. Because we're not going to discuss that again. That's a function of a computer telling them what to do.
Perfect.
You can make it happen.
Item E has to do with items that are in the addendum to the agenda or are laid on the table must be identified, and copies of documents must be available in the back of the chamber and also online. Introduction of ordinance or resolutions should be discouraged on the addendum to the agenda, and all additions to the addendum must include the documents and should not be title only. This is really to provide the public with information about the content of changes that occur in issues that are either in the addendum or laid on the table. We are aware of the complexity of this recommendation. And the idea is that we are erring on the side of making sure that people have information, access to information about the considerations that are coming up late. Is there any discussion about that item? Elvie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one really quick comment. This is really a really good recommendation. And part of it, in terms of not putting anything, not having any agenda items, has been discussed for probably 26 years that I've been dealing with the Assembly or more. But it's something that it's a battle. It really is, because, you know, sometimes we're able to do it and other times not, but we definitely appreciate this recommendation and we'll try to follow it.
Perfect.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Item F, Facebook and other forms of social media should be employed to provide public notice of proposed assembly business. It's just using the technology that is out there, and we don't even know what the newest technology is going to be, but we encourage you to explore it. Item G, better signage at the entrance to the assembly chamber should notify community members about the presence of the agenda and supporting documents under consideration at the meeting. Sometimes people come in, it's hard to imagine, they've never been there before, and they have no idea what all that stuff is on the wall. And so even having the idea that the agenda might be in a different color, or that substitute versions of ordinances might be in a different colored paper. Anyway, any comments about anything in broad topic number 2? Joelle?
Just double checking. No, it's not as public notice, no. The signage is under the public notice thing? Okay, I get it, all right. What about our navigator idea? Where is that?
Well, it isn't here, it didn't make it here yet, because
Is that a public notice thing, or is that it's hard to quantify what that concept could be applied under which category, but.
Public assistance.
Public.
Jennifer, the concept was to see if it's possible to have a human being. One of the things that happened was that sometimes materials that are placed in the back of the chamber run out, and there's nobody back there who notices that. Or there might be people wandering around trying to figure out what piece of paper they should be picking up. And it was suggested that students be available to assist us with handing out agendas and welcoming people to the assembly. And that along with that came the idea that there could be a navigator. And maybe the students could do this, where they say, welcome, this is the assembly meeting, this is what the agenda is, this is what the consent agenda is, the public hearings start here. Do you know what issue you're here to look at? Because maybe I can help you. But the notion is that there would actually be a person. And I know that it is immediately makes people nervous because of personnel costs, but perhaps there's a possibility of using students or other people who could be able to facilitate welcoming people and being a navigator. We have Bob, and then
Yeah,
Carol.
through the chair, some of the things we kicked around is we have programs like We the People. Stellar has a requirement for involvement in government, that this could well be done without cost and create a friendlier environment that would, I think, result in things being run a little more efficiently, again, without probably any cost, and providing them with their government. How many people did we have during our public meetings that came from schools? We signed slips that was a piece of their schoolwork. So, and maybe we could get some new assembly people in training.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I was going to make that comment too, because every single assembly meeting, there are students there who are there for their government class because they have to be. And I'm thinking that maybe we can, meet with the school superintendent and talk about a way to make this happen so that they get credit for doing just that. And I'm sure plenty of those students will love to be standing up there just handing out stuff and directing people to get credit. So that's something that we can work on.
Well, Scouts also
Thank you, Madam Chair.
have a merit badge for citizens in their community, merit badge.
Yeah.
We could make that an opportunity for them.
Great.
We have a lot of scouts every year come into this.
Yeah.
Okay, we have Carolyn and then Amanda.
Just real quick, through the chair, I was just also thinking it might take a load off of Amanda and some of the clerk's office having to care about running back and forth. So that was the other part of it.
Amanda?
I think it's a good idea. I think to recognize that it probably won't be without cost because someone would need to supervise what
Right.
and train and make sure that there's an understanding of what is supposed to be happening. So I do think that although we would have free, potentially, students working without pay, there would also be the staff support that would come out of the clerk's office to support this program. So.
Andy Holman?
I'd be glad to talk to one of our members, Pam Orm, who did We the People, a number of hands-on projects in the schools that involve students directly, one way or another. If that's something that ASD might actually consider coordinating and rotating amongst high school in a very formalized way, to where it might be able to become part of classes and rotate through the different high schools and shift that training and kind of coordination off onto them.
Terrific.
Perhaps.
Okay.
I'll investigate that and come back with what she says.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Mr. Trainee?
Andy, if you'd find out and then let us know about it, Elder or myself, we'll see about pursuing that. This is a great idea. The kids are non-threatening. It's a nice way, because so many people come into the assembly chambers, and it's a culture shock. The first thing they do is come and look at those ugly boards and try to figure out where we're at, and they have no idea. So it'd be good if we've got a navigator out there to help them.
Tim Potter?
I just wanted to add that there may be someday in the future that there's some people that are retirement age, that their car goes there every Tuesday, no matter what they do, that might want to volunteer to do that as well. Since they end up doing it in the back of the room anyway, every Tuesday, because nobody knows what's going on, and they keep asking, well, what's that? What do they wear?
Terrific.
Can you start Tuesday?
We could
I'll be a Walmart welcomer.
we could have a team of a retiree and a kid and blend them together.
That'd be good.
That's a great idea. Terrific.
Jim, you're on.
Great.
You and me, buddy.
Oh, okay.
All right, item on page 3.
Who's the young guy and who's the retiree?
Item number 3 is public hearings. And there are a cornucopia of opportunities associated with public hearings. First one is that the rules of the public hearing should be printed on the agenda. Number 2 is the assembly has the authority to limit the amount of time a person is allocated to testify. We recommend 3 minutes for members of the public and 5 minutes for community councils. And that's principally because community councils are actually articulated in the charter as an organization that's designed to try to solicit communication with neighborhoods. So, yes,
You brought
Mr.
up
Trainee.
community councils more than once, Madam Chair. I've rewritten the ordinance dealing with community councils. We're introducing it on the 22nd of October, set for public hearing probably in November. What we're trying to do with that is to reinvigorate community councils.
To do what?
To reinvigorate community councils, we've written the ordinance dealing with community councils. Or else we're trying to make them more viable, because they were really great when you guys did the charter, but some of them have become just a little stale. So we're gonna try and help get them to where we rely on them more for their input.
Is it money? What is it?
Some of it's money. We used to fund them at $130,000, now we fund them at $80,000. That's a problem. And we used to have a lot of assembly members that got a background in community councils. Some of them don't now. So I've got Tim Steele's working with me on it. We've got Amy Dabrowski, myself, used to be community council presidents. So we're writing the whole ordinance on community councils. Because we want to make sure they continue to be viable in Anchorage. Because that's the first place that somebody should get involved in local government, is a local community council.
And I just want to, identify that we have a whole section called Community Council Collaboration on page 5 that articulates much of the same points of view that you just expressed, Mr. Trainee. We also have other people who would like to talk about this issue. Mr. Potter?
Yeah, I just wanted, whether it's here or under item 5, that at least from my standpoint and participating on the task force, when it gets to the community council, one of the things that I would hope that the Assembly recognizes is that as a charter component of government for Anchorage, the community councils are very important, and it is a funding issue. And that should be a component. I've asked several times at the Assembly and pointed that out, and it really is one of our keys to success in the future. And they need to be funded better so that they can be as viable and provide service to the community and the Assembly as they were originally envisioned.
Thank you. Amanda?
And just one thing that we, and correct me if I'm wrong, we had talked about a designated representative, so not just anybody walking up and being able to say, I'm from such and such community council, but.
It says designated.
Yeah, we just didn't say that.
So, the community council only gets one bite out of the apple. It has to be the designated representative.
So not everyone can walk up and say, oh,
I'm from
Nice community council, never
Good
attended a
point.
meeting, but I'm
So-
here for about 5 minutes.
The designated person gets 5 minutes, everybody else gets 3. Any other comments about 3 and 5? And we realized that you'd have to change the ordinance to accommodate the 5-minute rule, but it's just our recommendation. Item number C is the sign-up sheet. And it says that the sign-up sheet may be employed to facilitate the management of a public hearing, so all who seek to testify may be heard in an orderly manner. If a sign-up sheet is employed, it must be managed by the municipal clerk to ensure fairness. People who sign up should be called in the order in which they signed. If a person is not available when called, they do not forfeit their chance to be heard. So if your timing was wrong and you happened to be in the bathroom when your name was called, you still have an opportunity to testify. Is there any discussion about this? We had hours of conversation about sign-up sheets, and I would just want you to know some of the things that informed us on this. One is that 90% of the public hearings you hold, there is no one testifying, and we are aware of that. So it was not our goal to compound your lives by requiring a sign-up sheet for every event. However, the use of a sign-up sheet is regarded as something that can facilitate cooperation and communication as opposed to limiting it. The reason that we're saying that we want the municipality to control the sign-up sheet is that different people receive different information when people who were not the official government officials were managing it at different times. We're just saying to make sure it's fair for everybody that the municipality has that responsibility. Mr. Trainee?
Jane, D on here takes care of any problems with sign-up sheets. Okay? Prior to closing public testimony, the chair should always ask if anyone else wishes to testify. And if somebody comes up, you keep the public hearing going. If no one comes in, you can close it. That takes care of somebody who was in the bathroom when the name was called.
Right.
Because the chair's responsibility is to make sure there's no one left to testify. End of story. I've been chairman 8 years. I know what I'm talking about, okay?
Yes, sir. Bob Churchill?
Just very quickly, one of the reoccurring themes I heard that they saw as a benefit to a sign-up list was predictability. That we could use those, people could look at that and say, I can go to the bathroom safely, or I can do this. The effective use of a sign-up sheet was to give predictability and inclusion. That was a couple pieces I heard repeated with.
Okay. Any other comments about this? All right, we'll move on to item D is just a reminder that it has to have the chair, because anyone else wants to be heard. They do it a lot, sometimes they don't. So it's just a reminder. Number E, we've changed this from the way that it's drafted. If a member of the public requests the use of a sign-up sheet and provides a 24-hour notice prior to the hearing to the clerk, this management tool shall be employed. That means that a member of the public can request a sign-up sheet be used. The experience of in AO 37 was that was requested and denied. And so the reason this is articulated is that if a member of the public seeks that management tool because they anticipate a large number of people to come, that when they put that in writing and ask for it, you must do a sign-up sheet. And if 5 people sign up, so be it. And if 100 people sign up, then it made good sense. Any concerns about that one?
I
Carolyn?
think we were also talking about maybe doing it as a close of business the day before, because the 24 hours was,
Staffing too.
yeah.
Sorry?
So,
Yeah, you'd have to staff, if you get that request, then you have to have, and it has to be run by a staff member, then you have to consider staffing, so you have to have that request early enough.
Okay, close of business the day before. Thank you for clarifying what 24 hours means. All right, close of business the day before the meeting. Okay, any other comments? Task force recommends the municipal clerk and the assembly explore ways for citizens to sign up electronically. And there may be a day when it becomes drop dead easy for that to occur, and it facilitates the movement of people. It is not regarded as a barrier. It is not regarded as something that is done instead of people being able to testify at the public hearing in person. Item G, if the assembly runs out of time for those who come to testify, the assembly will continue the public hearing and must identify the date of the continued hearing at a date as expeditiously as possible. If the sign-up sheet has been instituted, it continues to be available to anyone who seeks to testify as long as the hearing continues. The last sentence is changed from "you can have hearings on Saturday" to "the hearings could be set to a day and a time other than the normal Tuesday meeting." So you can do it any time of the day or week. It doesn't have to be Tuesday night. Mr. Trainee.
Yes, ma'am, you could make it read any day of the week. Quite frankly, there's nothing that says it has to be Saturday. You could have it on a Sunday too.
Right.
Any day of the week. The point is, you don't cut off public testimony. You just continue to another date, like till Thursday. I mean, in the past, we've had them come up on a Tuesday. I've moved it to Thursday if we don't have enough time to get everybody. The point is, you have more public hearings. You let the people testify. It's their issue that's in front of us.
And the other issue in this element is that at the time that you're continuing the public hearing, you tell people when it's going to be, so that they have some information about planning their lives when they. So you notify them at the time you extend the public hearing when it's going to be continued. And I know that's challenging also, because you have to look at what the agendas look like, what the possibilities are. I mean, I know that's a complex request, but we're
Make
saying.
sure the building's not being utilized.
Yeah,
And
it's
that's
all
always,
of
when
the
you sign up
above.
at
Yeah.
a meeting, it's a problem.
Okay, item H is a repetition of a previous item. Oh, in your version it doesn't there. I apologize. We only say that once. Item, I should go to the new version. It's the one that I've written on. Item H, if possible, what we changed this to say that from the public hearing, the title of the ordinance being heard or discussed should appear at the bottom of the TV screen. And the reason we're taking "if possible" out is because it used to be there, and we don't even know who made the decision or why to take it away. So it should read, item H should read, the title of the ordinance being heard or discussed should appear at the bottom of the TV screen so viewers know the topic being debated. Item I, if the Assembly anticipates that a public hearing will draw more people than the Assembly chambers can accommodate, the task force recommends that either the Marston Theater should be set up so people can hear and see the public testimony, or the Assembly consider moving the public hearing to a larger public space. Such action must be widely publicized. So we're just saying, if you expect several hundred people, perhaps you actually move the meeting to a facility that is owned by the public that could accommodate it. And we're told all the chaos that ensues when you try to move a meeting. But I'm just saying, we own buildings. We have the opportunity to use them if we have to. Mr. Trainee?
I think for this coming Tuesday, they've already done that. They've already got the Wilton Marston Theater for the overflow we anticipate showing up. So we'll see how this works with the overflow there, because I'm told Kirksoft's already taken steps to obtain it. So we've already taken what you've done with A,
Excellent.
and put it into practical
Sure.
application.
Sure. We're so happy to hear that. All right, any other considerations about any element of item 3, the public hearings?
Jane, is this where we wanted to include the language we discussed about using students and that whole process to support the process? Would that fit best under public hearings?
Sure.
Okay.
So the section about student navigators,
Exactly, the navigator process.
okay. It's actually, welcoming the public and orienting the public and making sure they know what the rules are. Perfect. Item number 4 is the substitute version of ordinances. In this section, we are talking about how you manage substitutes, and we know that's challenging as well. Item A, when the substitute S version of an ordinance is introduced, it should be accompanied by a statement showing what has been changed from the original version, and that should also be posted on the municipal website. I know that's a challenge. We know that's a challenge, but if it allows, oftentimes the substitute looks so different from the original that people go, I don't understand how we got here. And if in fact what has happened is we took the considerations that were articulated and we wove them into this, and this is how and why, then people have a higher comfort level that it actually had a rationale that supported it. Mr. Trainee?
Keep in mind, sometimes the author of the original version is not the author of the S version. Okay? And that happens.
You might notice that this item doesn't say who does this.
I know, I'm just telling you, because some
Politics
people
at the
assume
time.
that the author on the original one is the author of the S version. That's not, doesn't always happen.
Okay, but the object of the game with respect to this recommendation is that the member of the public who doesn't know who wrote it and doesn't know what the rationale was has an opportunity to understand that it used to be this and now it's that and this is how it's different. Elby?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Throughout the years that I've been around, we used to have with every single ordinance a memorandum of intent. And that's not happening right now, and it's something that I'm gonna look into and make sure that it happens, because it needs to. Not just for the public, but for us also. When you got a 97-page ordinance, it's really, really nice to have a memorandum of intent to help you understand what you're about to read, for starters, and for the public also. And so this is timely, this suggestion, because we also used to have, when there were substitutes, a memorandum of intent, but we need to, that's something internal that we really need to make sure happens. So I really appreciate this comment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Trainee?
One other thing, we used to have a statement of economic effects on every ordinance that was introduced, and that's not being done anymore. It would really be helpful if one of your recommendations is that every piece of legislation has to have a statement of economic effects attached to it, so the public knows how this impacts the tax dollars.
Sort of like a fiscal note.
Well, it's already required by code.
But we don't do it
Yeah.
anymore.
It is required.
Tim,
This
comment?
is Tim, and what I've observed, and since I commented on one not too long ago, that it is required to be attached. There's supposed to be a fiscal impact notice. It doesn't mean that there's been any thoughtful consideration or filling out of the paperwork to show that there's actually a fiscal impact. So it may be a blank piece of paper. It may just say none anticipated, when
At
that's
least they're on
clearly not
record.
true.
When's the last time you saw one though, Tim?
The one I commented on was the addition of the Eagle River kind of larger-than-life committee made up of the different community councils out there under Chapter 10. And
When was
Mr.
that?
Starr indicated that there was no economic impact. And I testified that, in fact, if there was a requirement for...
Ken, when was that?
Probably 3 months ago, 4 months ago.
Okay,
Yeah, sorry.
moving right along. We are on the S version,
We're on B, I believe.
thank you. Item B, the task force recommends copies of the S version be available for public review in the lobby and online. There have been occasions when S versions were literally laid on the table and there were not copies. And so there need to be, whatever version of the ordinance we're looking at, there needs to be copies of them available to the public, both electronically and in print. Item C, when the S version is being debated, the statement describing the changes should be displayed on the TV screen if possible. I don't know if that's possible, but they did that. Item D, the task force recommends that if the changes are so substantial that it significantly changes the original proposal through substitution or amendment, the new version should be evaluated to determine if it should be treated as a new ordinance, and the public hearing process should be started again. It's a consideration that we recommend. It doesn't say who does it. It doesn't say how you do it. For your information, in the borough, Juneau Borough,
City and Borough of
the
Juneau.
city and borough of Juneau have an ordinance to this effect that says if it changes substantially, it starts over again. And when we communicated with them, we asked them how they know that it's happened and who does it. And they said it's a collaborative process. And so I'm just saying, we think it's worthy of your consideration to evaluate if it is so different today than it was when we started, that we should maybe start over as a brand new ordinance. Ms. Gray
Thank
Jackson?
you, Madam Chair. I just want everybody to know that I'm not being rude, passing around my cell phone. Andy just did a Facebook showing us, and that's what we're looking at. So,
Thanks, Andy.
thank you, Madam Chair.
Just for the record, I
Nice
did that right
photo.
when we were talking about employing social media.
Penny?
A comment on the redoing or making it a significant change, a new ordinance, is that people complained that if they commented on an ordinance proposal, and then it was changed to like an S2 version, and it was significantly changed, they couldn't testify again.
Right.
You only testify once on one ordinance, so if they can't change that, then somebody needs to let people testify if it's significantly changed one way or another, and this way we allow that at least.
Well, Madam Chair, if I'm at, it becomes a game, because if you know there's going to be a 1 or a 2 or a 3 version, why you can't use your one time at the mic on the S version. So then it becomes this rolling game of how many versions are there going to be, and when do you decide to weigh in? Because you only get one bite at the apple no matter how many S versions there are. And it's a little ridiculous from the person seeking to kind of be able to affect the outcome, whatever it is along the line, that you have to play this game of deciding when you're going to testify, which version is the one that's actually going to go somewhere, get legs, or is there going to be 3 or 4 more like it? So it's really frustrating as a citizen.
Any comment from Amanda and then Tim?
And it might be beneficial to add language that says if there is an S version and you testified on the first one and you are speaking to a change between, maybe that might be a recommendation that this committee has, that if there is an S version and although you testified on the first one, that shouldn't preclude you from testifying on the second one if there's substantial changes.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of goes along with it going back through the process, but it might just be another opportunity to say that.
I like that, Amanda.
I do too. I would support that.
Okay, I'm going to draft that for your
Yeah,
consideration.
just so that the assembly knows, this along with sign-up sheets and a couple of other things were the biggest items of discussion, probably within the task force and from the public.
Would that be designated S1, S2, S3? The assembly makes that determination
Yes, ma'am?
so that you would know where to apply this rule.
Yes, but, and Joel's comment was, there was an S1 version, and you testified, then you cannot testify in
No,
S2,
but
and you
that
cannot
would be
testify.
easy enough to outline. If it's given a new number, that judgment would have been made, that it's substantive.
Okay. Mr. Trainee?
Case in point, on 37S2 was given to the Assembly in the addendum to the agenda the night it was approved by the body. The Assembly didn't even have the S version. So I can understand how confused the public was when they're up there testifying on 37. And we were given that night the S2 version the administration wanted to use as a vehicle for passing that. We didn't even see it until they put it in the addendum to the agenda, which gave us about a half an hour to an hour and a half to try and go through it and read it.
The
It's a
addendum
problem.
were laid on the table.
Huh?
Was it the addendum or laid on the table?
It was in the addendum. Or laid on the table, one of the two. But we-
Addendum's on Friday,
I
laid
know,
on the table.
but this one we didn't get till that night, till Tuesday is when we got it.
Yeah.
Because believe me, at 37, I would have known about it had I seen it earlier.
So maybe there should be a recommendation that items laid on the table cannot be acted on that night.
That may be a good idea.
I like that.
I do too, I like that a great deal.
Wow,
Nice one, nice one.
Yeah.
Now you really put us in the,
Can I just express a cautionary note on that one?
So then you're waiting
That now instead of having cleaned up S versions, there's going to be sausage making at the meeting, which may be wholesale worse than what they currently do, so just cautionary.
it's dangerous.
Thank you, and actually, that caution has been offered to us before about the S version process actually is designed to try to make a more rational product, and that the amendment process at the assembly table is, as Tim articulates, sausage making, and that someplace in between rests rational thought. Anyway, Mr. Train? No? Okay.
Yeah, and that was my point. I mean, we don't want to discourage S's because S's tend to allow the public to see what's out there, what somebody, the assembly or the mayor are thinking, and they have the opportunity to respond. If we discourage the use of S's, then all of a sudden, as Tim says, we'll have sausage making after the public hearing is closed, and that's
Right.
potentially
Exactly. The public
worse.
hearing's closed, the amendments get made, considered, voted on, and, the public doesn't get a chance to talk about it.
What do you guys think?
May I? Thank you, Madam Chair. Oftentimes, substitute versions or S versions are a result of requests from our constituents, too, so we have to keep that in mind. It's not always an assembly member's personal opinion, it's requests that we get from our constituents also. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Joelle?
One of the things, 4A, statements that show what's been changed from the original version should be posted to the municipal website. It didn't make it into this final document, but in Juno, they do a form of track changes in the document. They have bracketed information and they have underlined information, so you can see the document moving live. But when you go from S1 to S2, you don't.
It's right here, E says that, doesn't it?
But an S1, the S version is a whole new version that may or may not actually have the bracketed and capitalized information of the prior version, right?
Rarely.
If I may, our documents are bracketed and underlined. Bracketed means it's out, and underlined means it's new. And even when we have substitute versions sometimes, at least our attorney, shows she bolds what's new in the substitute version. Maybe that's a way to, so that people can know what the changes are, but our attorney is pretty on top of that already. Yeah, thank you.
So let's go back. Item E tries to articulate that, which is visually being able to see the track changes or additions or deletions. And so could we just understand what really does happen now? Could you just tell us one more time?
Because it's my understanding, I have seen S's come through without any brackets. And I'm sitting there like this, trying to do it myself.
I'm not comfortable enough. I don't know how other departments handle it, how Assembly Council handles it. Because not all S versions come from the same spot. Sometimes they come from other departments, and so I can't speak to what happens across the board, and I apologize.
That's right, there are any rules.
And it might be nice to have a policy that would be across the board, because it might already be happening, and I don't know, so.
Okay, Andy,
Just from a parliamentary consideration, with an S version, the entire original S would be struck and replaced by, so I mean, technically, in
That's the
offering a
easiest way.
substitute motion, under Robert's Rules of
If you've got
Order.
an S version, I've got an S1 version, and my S1 version is used to substitute. That wipes out your S version.
But there has to be an.
So the entire first S is struck.
It's gone.
And substituted by a second. So
But that's not automatic. It has to be approved by the assembly. In other words, Dick
Or it
could throw in
does.
an S1 and everybody still likes the S, then the S1
Oh,
doesn't
right.
go
Yeah,
anywhere.
Mike could
Whichever
vote it
is
down.
And
document
he
is
can start
moved.
amending.
But while you're
But if you've
considering
got the
it,
votes,
being in a couple of bodies that do this thing and putting the live document up there and someone's typing away furiously, in a substitute motion, the entire original motion is a strike through. Even though it may contain,
Chunks of language that
Yeah,
are still
so-
carried forward.
yeah.
okay, let me perhaps summarize and say that the object of this recommendation is to allow the community to know what has changed and however we accomplish that. If there's an explanation of what the S version does, if there's a track change that says this is deleted and this is added, that the goal is that people would actually have a clue about the transformation of the idea through the process. Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me make one really quick comment. But there used to be, well, let me back up. And keep in mind that documents come from the administration through the chairman, okay? A lot of stuff comes through the administration. Most of it comes through the administration. But anyway, there used to be a booklet, and it was a guideline on how to do ordinances and assembly documents some years ago, really. And it was really, really good, and it talked about, it just talked about the process, and it showed examples of, and I think we need to resurrect that.
It's still available on Universe.
Okay, well, people need to know, yeah, and use it so that we're consistent.
where's it available in?
It's an internal document available on the internal municipal website, so it is available to.
We need to make sure people use it.
Okay. And the last issue
Yes,
on the
Andrea?
substitute version, excuse me.
I heard you make a great purpose statement for the S versions, and I haven't, is that in our document now, or will you please make sure it's in the document? Because I think all of our recommendations have pros and cons. And if we just have that guiding purpose as they continue to make their sausage.
Okay. I will write that as the introduction to the substitute version section. Okay, any other comments about substitute versions or what we suggested? Do you want to include items laid on the table should not be acted upon at the same meeting? Amanda?
I just want to speak to that. At the last assembly meeting, there was a laid on a table item that was a resolution to allow the Alaska Native Heritage Center to have
Temporary non-objection of alcohol license.
Yeah.
Or catering.
Sometimes laid on the table items are,
Time
recognition resolutions. And so there are,
Simple, easy.
Okay,
things
so
should
how
be
do you?
allowed.
what do
I'm
you
just
think?
saying that sometimes they kind of come through or a need for budget appropriations and stuff like that. So sometimes,
They're time sensitive.
yeah.
Okay, Mr. Potter.
My suggestion is, I don't think we need to incorporate that they can't be heard at that hearing, and let's see how it goes, and we've given them guidance as to what we're really trying to have happen.
Yeah, if we have guidance.
Because at some point, we could shut
Bring
down
it
the
in.
whole city if we wanted to, so I don't
I
want to
don't,
do that.
I don't know that we have the power to do that, but we have the power to recommend. Mr. Franny.
Ma'am, if you just leave it off,
Okay.
we can't legislate good behavior, okay?
Okay, gotcha. All right, moving right along to item number 5, continuation of public hearings. The first one says that you have to do it at a date specified and that the public record will remain open when you continue. Item B is if you should consider scheduling the additional meeting to accommodate public participation. Charter, this one says you could have more meetings. You don't have to be limited to 2 per month. if you find your continually continually advancing the public hearings, that you could actually hold additional meetings. So that's,
I agree with you, ma'am. We could meet, you don't need, the problem is the assembly needs to step up to plate, need more meetings, have more meetings.
That's all that
If
I
you don't like it, then don't run for office.
Right.
Okay, item 6 is, did you get my hand up? Nope. Okay. Item 6, the public record of an ordinance or resolution. This point is really very simple. Item 6 says we will create a public record that includes all the materials that assembly members receive from individuals or other people that go to the clerk's office. So if they get emails, it says please send to all the assembly members. If they get background materials that are please send to all materials, that those appear on the website so that the public has the advantage of knowing what everyone else has said on a particular topic. That's what this means to the creation of the electronic public record of all the materials that you receive. And that you cannot take anonymous submittals and post them. It's not a blog, it's information that comes to you from people that is shared so that everyone else knows what you've seen.
We discussed putting an account system up so that you would log in with a username, password. Your name would be printed with whatever public testimony you submit, just as your name is given when you step up to the podium in the chambers. And there would be, somebody recommended you to connect with MyAlaska, but I don't think so because this is Alaska Muni. But some sort of, when you sign up for your account, your address needs to be given, a phone number, different identifiers so that you can prove who you are. That information would never appear with your public testimony that you've submitted in writing, but it would be there so that the clerk can verify, yeah, you are part of our assembly or part of our municipality.
Thank you. And item B re-articulates the idea of the kiosk that it has not only the agenda but also the entire electronic public record of a process of an ordinance so that citizens have access to that. Any questions about 6, the public record? Item 7, we've changed this from the meeting room to call it the assembly chambers. Basically, it suggests what do we do to make that room more user-friendly? We suggest a reader board that displays where you are on the agenda and what's happened to other items. That we suggest you recommend that you see if you can improve the acoustics in the room so people can hear better. We also said that we've got people testimony that people couldn't tell who was talking. And so they suggested that you have a little light that lights up when you hit your microphone so that they have a clue who's talking.
That's cute.
And then on Monday, or on Tuesday night, it was also suggested that you actually restructure the room so that the assembly is not 5 feet higher than the rest of the community, and that you actually rebuild that room so that you're at a lower level. So the recommendations are, how do you make the room user-friendly? How is it possible for people to better hear and see? And is it possible so people are not intimidated by the opportunity to communicate with their elected officials? Mr. Tranian?
And I think every one of us has been elected to that body that's taken a seat, recognizes that system needs changed. The dais is put together wrong. I'd rather have us like having to look up the person testifying, than them have to look up at us. It's wrong, but we can't change it. It is what it is. We have a lot of other needs for the money coming in, so we'll work on it, but I don't see that happening in a hurry.
Perfect. Ms. Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to say that similar to what Mr. Train just said in terms of, we've been talking about the fact that we shouldn't be elevated like that, at all. But what it would take to change it, I don't know, but I don't know. Maybe I'll just step out of my seat and go down.
Can we buy you shorter chairs?
I'm sorry.
Shorter chair.
Oh, that's funny.
Then all we'll see is Elvie and Conley.
Jennifer has issues.
Okay, you guys,
50%'s not
wait a
bad.
minute.
So we're
Jennifer,
thinking about using tennis
ladies and
court.
gentlemen, Jennifer would like to come.
I'm very happy with shorter chairs, but my assembly fun of me. But when I asked about the dais, because I find it really uncomfortable, it is a block of cement, is what I was told. And so it was poured to the foundation.
Really?
I know, guys.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
Madam
ma'am.
Chair. I think the one thing that bothered me on that were the number of people that testified that said they felt more intimidating to come to this meeting place than any others where they had appeared. So there's something about the dynamics of the assembly being higher, people having to come and walk down and speak up.
It's pretty
Yeah.
bad. It's
So-
been bad.
It has a
I was-
two-way.
I was talking with the library director about making that room into a restaurant.
Great.
And then we maybe get another chamber someplace else.
Terrific. And I know that with the potential development of restructuring of the library entrance, there might be opportunity for making it a more welcoming venue as well. Anyway, we don't know what to do about this, but we want to say user-friendly and less intimidating is really a goal. And if you can't change the physical space, being welcoming is something that is an opportunity for all assembly members. Item number 8 is the collaboration with the community councils, where we are basically saying, please review the budget for the community councils. We stop short of saying increase it. We ask you to review it so that they are as effective as is humanly possible. Now we go to item 9.
One last thing, because I know we're running out of time, but we do not fund the community councils. We fund money to the Federation, who is an outside contractor that provides a service to the community councils. And so the argument's been for years, should we directly fund the community councils and bypass the Federation? It's not in the charter anywhere. But if we don't fund the Federation, it ceases to exist. But there's some community councils that don't like their money going to the Federation. So that's always going to be a fight.
Okay.
They want to be directly appropriated by us.
I understand. If resources are the issue, we suggest that you consider a way to make sure those resources get to the people who would like to communicate with you. Item number 9 is assembly presence, and I want you to know that one of our members, Amanda, did not participate in this discussion, and she wants you to know that. And then we affirm her right not to talk about this. However, the rest of us, we're happy to talk about the assembly presence. Number 1.
We'll grant you absolution.
Number 1, this all has to do with how people feel when they are in that room. And number 1 was, I'm going to go back to the principle that we're adding, which is respect and consideration, is that they're valuable, that they are valuable in the conversation about the development of ordinances. So number 1 was, we know you need to go have dinner. Sometimes the dinner breaks have lasted a really long time and people are left hanging out, waiting to find out what happens next. Therefore, we are suggesting that you minimize the amount of time at dinner. And what you have in front of you says 15 minutes. And what we have talked about is, please consider eating at 5 o'clock and starting the meeting at 5:30, but don't break for dinner, because there are people who are waiting who have come, and then when they say they're taking a dinner break, sometimes it goes on for a longer period of time, and people for whom it's the first time they've ever been there have no idea what's going on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not to sound arrogant, but I have never, ever taken a dinner break. I don't. When my colleagues go on dinner break, I stay out there talking to folks because I don't think it's right. That's my personal opinion. And I also feel that, I get enough of a stipend, I can buy my own food, and I can eat when I go home. So I really think, and this is just how I feel, and I'm sure my colleagues will feel, but I don't think that there should be a dinner break. I think if somebody has to get up to go to a restroom, fine, but you eat before you get there, or eat when you go home, or miss a meal. And that's my personal opinion. So, and I'm not, suggesting that we not have a dinner break, not really, but, I'll continue to do what I do. But anyway, that's how I feel about it. But thank you for that comment, I really appreciate it.
Many, many, many people at the public hearing commented on this. So I'm just saying, it's a it appears to feel like they're not important and their time is not important.
Okay.
Yes, sir, Bob?
Just to dovetail that, we also became aware, at least I wasn't aware, that oftentimes it's the first opportunity all day the support staff has had to eat. That's one of the reasons I'd really encourage you, if we had to change code, to say, all right, we're going to get there. If you want to eat, get there at 5, you eat from 5 to 5:30, and then the meeting actually starts at 5:30. And then go forward. And I've been at enough meetings to know you don't take a dinner break. You're always on the floor, and Dick often is in the same place.
Okay. I don't want to lose Jennifer, so I just want to say the rest of this quickly. Item number 2 is really the crux of respect. And it is assembly members are encouraged to listen attentively to the members of the community who come to testify and propose ordinances. People who are walking around, people who are on their cell phone, people who are talking to each other. It is confusing to members of the public about whether or not, or somebody's actually talking and people are wandering away. And so I'm just saying, this effort is how do we enhance the respect that we're showing to the members who are testifying before us. And so it's a really big consideration in terms of how it appears. And anyway, we encourage you to listen attentively. To that end, we're going to add a couple additional items. One is a new item C, which is the use of personal electronic devices during public hearings is discouraged, as it appears that assembly members are distracted from listening. And that's just, don't be on your phone, don't be on your iPad if you can avoid it, because people don't know what you're doing and it doesn't look like you're listening to them. Yes, sir?
Some of the people bring up the city code on their computers because we have it electronically. So some of my colleagues, for example, Harriet is good for that. When the public was testifying on the issue of code, she would bring it up on her iPhone so she could look at it. So that's done. And some of us have a little sheet that gives us a list of every registered voter in the state of Alaska. So we have people that come up and say, I'll never vote for you again. First of all, they always say, I've always voted for you. They say, I will never vote for you again if you don't vote for me on this issue. It's easy to just pull up their name in the roster and find they're not registered to vote in the state of Alaska. Hence.
Okay. The kindest, gentlest way we can say this is that the use of personal electronic devices is discouraged.
Yeah, that's okay.
And it's just a matter of respect. Item D, telephonic participation. Some people talk to us about this and we're concerned that if there were 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 members who were on the telephone, who are they talking to? And so the notion was that telephonic participation should probably have some guidelines so that there's a certain number of you who are, and you guys decide that, but if 2 or 3 of you are gone, but you're on the telephone, so there are disembodied voices, thank you, Jennifer, for being here. We're suggesting you have guidelines for telephonic participation. And then the last item that would be added is, please, you are encouraged not to use the questions that you pose to the public to give additional time to people who are testifying. So this is a broad statement that says, when you say, oh, Ms. Embick, is there anything else you'd like to tell us when my 3 minutes is up? People who didn't get that kind of a question think that I'm getting additional time. And so then the notion is that the utilization of the question to simply add additional time to individuals gives some people an advantage that other people do not have. And we really encourage you to consider how that looks to everybody else. And you've done that to me many, many, many times. Oh, is there anything else I'd like to say? I have the same requirements that everybody else would, and 3 minutes, unless I'm the designated spokesperson for the
community council.
Again, I think it's important to note that it's not that the assembly shouldn't ask specific questions of those that are testifying. That's okay. But it becomes a very politicized allowance for one part of the body to get additional testimony in on the issues in support of their position. Likewise, it's the same on the other side. So it becomes kind of a politicized deal rather than a seeking out of specific information about what that person's testifying.
We understand what you're saying.
We get it,
Yeah.
loud and clear.
I guess the last thing I want to say is that the overall intention of this task force, having spent a lot of time on this subject, is how do we maximize the information and the value of people interacting with you to make better laws? And how do we make sure that people feel welcome and that their testimony is valued? Because we think that improves the quality of laws in our community. So anything we came in here with was really to try to achieve that goal. And it is not in any way to be punitive. It is designed to try to enhance us going forward. Bob Churchill and then Dick Tracy.
One thing, as the vice chair of this, I have been amazed at how inclusive and efficient Jane has run this process. It's been an absolute delight.
Thank you. Mr. Trainee.
Housekeeping, Tuesday nights, you guys are coming to talk to us. We're gonna have chairs there that we reserved on the front row, so you have a place to sit, because I anticipate a full crowd. So I talked to Chris, I'm gonna reserve the front row there for you guys.
Thank you very much.
So you don't have to worry about it. No parking.
Currently on the agenda, the piece of the agenda item says it is the 20th version that is before you. And what we will be doing is revising
Can you give us
that.
an addendum? I just don't know where we're at on this.
Friday at 4:55.
Yes, version. Good example.
It's not going to be anything laid on the table. On the agenda, currently, there's an Assembly informational memorandum, and then we will give the report to the body, and the body can choose to incorporate it.
Thank you. Okay, but
Madam
that's a
Chair,
fair point.
what do we intend to present to the Assembly? I know that we're going to do the report, but what are not all the words, but I don't expect this as a work session. It's merely a kind of what we did and when we did it, and here's what we recommend.
Mr. Trainee?
If you do that, Earl, we'd be honored to have you guys there, because I think it's really appropriate. You're coming talking about maximum citizen participation, and our room will be packed that night.
For
I think-
another meeting or other things?
For that meeting, but for another issue. So, it's going to be good because it's a great time for you to come and talk to the Assembly. And just tell us a few minutes on what you've done. We can read the rest of it.
We haven't worked that part out yet, but by golly, I think we're ready to figure it out. Yes, Elfie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Here's what I see as the process, and if anybody doesn't agree, please let me know. But on Tuesday, the task force is going to present the recommendations to the Assembly. Okay? The Rules Committee will talk about the fact that we had a meeting today with you. Okay? And what I did was, for each one of the points, I wrote codified if I thought it could be codified. And so what I anticipate happening is Dick and I and Ms. Johnson will approach our attorney and ask our attorney to draft up a document, okay, that codifies some of your recommendations that can be codified. After that, we anticipate having another meeting with the task force so that you can review our ordinance. Then we'll have the ordinance before the newly established Rules Committee, and then we'll introduce it on the floor for public hearing. But that's how I see the process going. And I want to move along. I don't want the recommendations to get filed away and then that's the end of it, because, I mean, right, I understand, but I just want to see things move along. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. That's a big deal. Thank you. Andy?
This isn't directly on our mission, but I think it probably would be something for the Rules Committee. Issues were raised about us being under the Open Meetings Act and our compliance with the Open Meetings Act. And I'll be honest, I don't know much about it. I've been doing a little bit of reading and self-education, and it appears that we should be. And I'm just thinking, I like the idea of what you've done in forming a citizen task force. It'll bring in people like myself that don't necessarily understand all the implications of being on a commission that advises an elected or a governing board. If you're able to create...
I'll ask our attorney.
Yeah, like a cheat
To look
sheet
at that, okay?
that you might, in that email that we got inviting us to be part of it, if you write back and you say, yes, I will, you get, okay, you are now sitting on a task force that is subject to the Alaska Open Meetings Law, these are things that you ought to consider. That if I wind up inviting some of these people over to my house for dinner, I've broken the law, and I don't need to ever do that. But
Gee, you didn't invite us over.
I didn't get
it was a secret.
That was the secret.
Actually, I do think that's a very good idea, and I think that's.
I do.
I will ask Julia to do that, and we'll get you guys a copy of her recommendation.
And I sent out the Open Meetings Act to everyone back in July when it was first brought up, but I can resend it too. And I recognize that it probably isn't as readable as maybe sort of a breakdown of it, but I will resend it because it is, you can sort of scan through it and find.
I didn't know
things.
you meant me. That was- But no, I appreciate you doing that.
I'll just
I
resend
managed.
it. I know it's, we sort of ongoing had this conversation, but I'll just resend it so everybody has it.
Thank you.
That's sort of like today I got here and I said to the guard, oh, I've got about 10 people coming and I know you've got things set up so people can't park there. And he said, no, it's for you. And I was like, really?
Yeah.
I've not heard that no one read my email that I sent out yesterday. I'm
No,
not-
I read it. I'm expecting my car will be towed.
Well, to the Rules Committee, it has been our pleasure to serve, and this team of people have worked really hard, and so they have been spectacular citizens on behalf of our community, and it's been a pleasure to work with them to give these ideas to you.
Well, Jane, on behalf of the Rules Committee, thank you guys for all you do. We've got your name, we've got your phone number, so we have other committee assignments for you.
No good people go unpunished. Okay, for task force members, I will send out the cleaned up version of this to you in the next.
Have we officially approved these amendments? that we
No, in
talked
fact,
about?
let's do that right now,
Okay.
if you have time.
Could we talk about a redacted, is that the pronunciation version, so we can actually see the changes you make?
Oh, absolutely.
That'd be in
Send out
Microsoft Word.
a track changes, not redacted.
Track changes.
Redacted would be blacked out. You mean track changes.
And Cheryl, I just want, once upon a time, we had a draft, and I did send both the track change and the track
I know.
change.
That's what I'm asking for,
And
yes.
So you want that for this?
Yes.
I'd like to put a motion on the floor then that all the amendments we've offered today with the wordsmithing of our chair be added to the document.
Second.
Is there an objection?
I have a friendly,
Yeah, I have a.
which is subpart D, you read about the people who are participating by telephone.
Yeah.
You read that to them, but I don't think we actually said that
Actually,
out
I
loud.
was using Tim's words.
I will take that as a friendly amendment.
As a second, I accept it as a friendly.
I think it
Herbert's
was,
friendly guy.
it was,
Yeah, fantastic.
And
Tim had suggested that we want to suggest guidelines for maximum telephonic participation at one public meeting, so no more than 2 or 3 members actually being on the phone at the same time.
You know, I think
And I
if we,
I'm sorry. Some of that's addressed that there has to be 8 bodies in the room, but there has to be a quorum.
Physically present.
That's true? Really? I mean, that is
Yeah.
a rule.
Yeah, but that does allow for 3 people to be on the phone. So if you're okay with 3 people, and I have been at meetings where there've been 3 people, but if
His
you're.
recommendation says,
Is a quorum 6 or is a quorum 8, which is a supermajority?
6.
I think 6.
Oh, okay.
if I could,
Yeah, the point
Put
is,
another
oh,
wrinkle
but the
on
point
this.
is, Jane's language was, let's just be sensitive to it, Assembly, and let's draft some rules so
All
that
that they need is
the
to have
public
some minimum
understands.
guidelines.
well, again, if we could go back to the purpose of being careful about the telephonic. Why are we, and then they can decide the rules. But here's what we're seeking with our sensitivity. And I have one more issue. The adding the time to a particular speaker is really, I don't know how to say it, it's very unevenly applied. And it will be unevenly applied in the future no matter what. So I actually hate to open that can of worms. Maybe mention that this was of great concern to people who testified before us. But I hate to make a recommendation because I don't see any way for the fairness to be.
Well, I can't legislate fairness. Let me just back that up a little bit. We've heard and we've seen chairs who feel empowered who have the the strength to hold to the 3 minutes and to cut people off. And then you have people who just can't bring themselves to do it. And part of what we
Now,
are
that's a different
doing,
matter,
well,
'cause
but
we're adding-
it all feeds into the same thing. It's an issue of discipline. It's an issue of how much discipline are you going to have with the citizenry and with your fellow assembly members as the chairperson. So if we make the recommendation that we think this like offering 3 minutes should be the limit, and this offering of extra time is it's impossible to apply fairly. It's impossible to
It is
apply
impossible.
fairly. And so we highly suggest that you don't do that. We highly suggest you stick to the 3 minutes, and we highly suggest that you don't offer the extra time. This will give the chairs who have the ability and have no fear of bringing down the gauntlet at 3 minutes, they won't need to appear like they're being overly strict. And the chairs that can't seem to bring themselves to do it can fall back and blame us, right? Because I think they worry about appearing to be bad guys and being mean. And but it can be really crazy.
This also gives the ability of the other assembly people to say, hey, time out, we had
Right.
strong recommendations from the task force that we do this, and, let's tighten it up a little bit.
And again, one of the things, having run as many of us had a meeting, if I have Tim testifying and he says, it's 17 widgets per hour and I need to know what a widget is, I ought to be able to find that
Right,
out.
absolutely.
Versus, Tim, tell me everything you've ever known about a widget. And that's what I think we're really saying.
Could I make a comment?
Yes, please.
One thing that happens, I was always told that in the public hearing, assembly members are only to ask questions. And there's times with assembly members, they don't ask questions, they sometimes say how they feel, how they should feel, but it's a statement. And it goes on, and I know that you didn't address that here, just sort of an improper etiquette and code, and I didn't know what your feelings were about that.
That's a good point.
Well,
Don't testify. Assembly should testify while they're asking questions, yeah.
We actually did not, that's a good question. In my comments, I did say we suggest that assembly members do not use the question time as a vehicle to give additional time to favored testimony.
Or
But
to
you're
add-
asking,
That
but
is more phrase.
you're adding a different wrinkle, which is, and don't give speeches.
Or comma, including your own.
Please, the person is there to give testimony and to have an exchange with the assembly, to provide us with how they either feel or their knowledge on the issue. And so it's always my impression that we should garner as much from the person that's there testifying and leave whatever we think to the point when we debate with other assembly members.
That's a very good point.
That's very
Good point, Jennifer.
Um,
I have to run, I have another meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, Amanda.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you,
What I really appreciate your comment. One of the things that seems to have gotten lost, and I don't know where it is, there was a lengthy discussion in the task force about whether or not we would limit testimony to residents of Anchorage. And someplace we wrote, and we decided we couldn't figure out how to do that because property owners stepped. So we said that the chair could ask people to articulate what neighborhood they live in, so that you are at least aware of whether or not they are even residents of the municipality of Anchorage. But I don't know where it went.
We didn't conclude.
We did say, but
No.
someplace we wrote
We
that said
had
that
maybe asked.
the chair may ask
Right.
your residents, but I don't know, I can't find it.
I'm working on it.
But it might be.
Part of my second is to add that back.
Oh,
And it's probably here someplace. I
Here it
just
is.
saw.
Well, here's a requirement.
but say where
It
it
is
is.
a 3A, line 4. And it's a
Possibly.
requirement for testifiers to identify themselves by name and possibly by community or neighborhood. And I don't remember us agreeing to require.
No.
We did not require it.
No, we did not
I just
require
lost
it.
that particularly, because it does give you a tool to at least say, where do you
There was
live?
another place.
No, that was it. And
That
I
was it.
believe
There's
that we
another place.
decided that it would be a
Jim, you still have that as a
indicator
I'll accept that, and I think we're ready to vote
Um,
on including the things we've offered today to the document. I'm ready to vote.
Well, I would agree to the 3-minute limit with Jane's language that you read out loud, because it gives the
And
purpose.
Jennifer's addition that they shouldn't be advocating their position
That's
when they're
fine,
asking the
that's
question.
great, yes.
Do you agree about adding a principle about mutual respect and corresponding conduct by both the public and the elected officials?
Yeah, both ways, both
Okay.
directions.
And you agree that if possible, these principles should apply to all municipal boards and commissions? And explore opportunities for collaboration between community members and public officials on complicated or contentious issues, try more public committee meetings, workshops, or dialogues.
I do think we're going a bit beyond when we recommend for other things. I think this was a designation by the Assembly for specific things as to how they operate. And I think we kind of take it upon ourselves to do these other things without going through the specifics of the operation.
Then do we want to make that as just a, when we do the thing with the Assembly, a suggestion to say, here's our recommendation for you, and you might give some thought to adding these to others?
Well, we
But
had
just
a
make a
That's what I
suggestion.
intended. I thought that's what we'd intended, was
Yeah.
that we weren't going to make it mandatory. Of course, we can't make
Right.
anything mandatory, but the Assembly should
We're getting
consider
a
this
second bite at
applying.
the apple with LV's process. You recognize that, we're gonna have a whole second bite.
Yeah.
So we might want to reserve it for that time. in the
Okay,
process.
let's just go back to a question that Arliss posed 15 minutes ago, which is how do we want to present to the Assembly on Tuesday night? And we
Do
probably
we
got.
need to vote on what we?
Oh,
yeah,
we
why
have?
don't
Good point, thank you.
Yeah. I'm ready to vote.
It's the approval of all the items that have been, will be added and will be conveyed to you.
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Good,
Aye.
thank you.
Then I'm sorry.
All right, so I figure we're going to probably have about, wait a second.
3 minutes.
How long?
Okay, keep in mind that there are Assembly members who don't even know we've been doing this. I mean, I'm sure there are. They,
They aren't reading the newspaper?
and that all they're going to get is an information memorandum that said that the task force has been meeting all summer and they're going to come in with their recommendations. I sort of regard it as an opportunity to inform them, and if there's that room full of people, the people as well, about a few of the highlights of our recommendations. And I seek your guidance on what are your faves, what are your favorites?
Well, Madam Chair, I would certainly point out in beginning things that we are responding to issues by the chairman of the Assembly, and we have yada yada been doing that. And then I would be very careful to keep within, I don't know, what do we decide, 3 minutes
How long
or
do we have?
5?
Actually, we have an official appearance request where we've
Well,
got,
it's actually on the consent agenda, so an assembly person will have to pull it
Oh.
off the consent agenda, and then it will be whatever it will be.
I think that's true. I don't think there's a time limit for it.
No, I don't think we have a time.
But I think we should set a time limit when we go in, so we don't abuse their unspoken word.
do we want a couple of people to speak?
I don't.
I would encourage us to have you speak
Yeah,
for
I
us. You've done such a fabulous job.
Yes.
And I would trust your judgment to say, this is the heart and core and soul. You have spoken so well today and of it, and keep it 5 minutes or less. And if they want to
Well,
ask
how
us
long was your
questions.
introduction today? I think that's one of the clues. Your introduction today was excellent, and it would inform the whole body. I'm thinking 10 minutes, but,
Oh, it's
Yeah.
shorter than that, actually.
well, I meant, because then we have to go through the items. So your intro is one thing, and then you've got your items, and you're asking for favorites.
And I don't think we'll go through all mine. I think what we're talking about is the tone and the texture of making sure that people know about the meeting, that they have every availability of every resource that we have to know what you're doing, and that you're welcoming their participation, and that's both the public hearing process and in how you treat people when there's a continuation. I mean, I wouldn't
You don't,
Well,
ABC.
I would also mention the charter. You know, you and Arliss were both charter commissioners. They're very lucky to have your participation on this, in this body.
Yes,
And
we are.
they need to know about the charter, because quite clearly they don't.
I
Or they
will,
wouldn't have done what they did on 37.
after the first testimony, I tallied how often different issues were raised during our September hearing. Number one is the sign-up sheet issue. Do not use it to limit testimony. Use it as a management tool only, but not to limit. The reader board I have is number 2, making the whole process in the chambers much more obvious and clear to folks, and the label you can sneak in there. I lost number 3. But I've got a number 4. The S versions for the next one. Okay, where in the heck is my number 3?
It's probably people wandering around in the middle of public testimony.
Yeah, the respect issue.
Oh, here it is. My 3 is the website. And I'm sure respect is in here, but it didn't rise. But feel
Yeah,
free.
I
I'm just
think-
giving that
yeah, I think
information.
we'd
I'm
leave it
not
to
telling you
discretion. You're
to
a
follow
chair,
my
let's-
numbers.
I just want to make the suggestion that I think you could actually just highlight, you could actually just say, these are the 9 points, these are the 9
Yeah.
groups of things we addressed.
Yeah.
Because in our discussions, we found these are the 9 areas that needed focus. Public testimony,
Oh, I like
the
that.
attendance of the assembly, S versions, and then each of those pieces are gonna pique their interest for a different way. They can read it, just so that the public has an idea what was the entire
Big picture.
vision of what we addressed. From public participation all the way down to the way they treat people, and everything in between, but just reading basically the 9 basic points, I think.
See, and I like that idea. We talk about the principles, you know, and those are the principles, the 9 areas.
Principles.
And that's it.
And then we're good to go, and let them ask questions.
James, some of these things will be subject to ordinance change. Others are just how the public sees you, how you react to the public. You might want to separate those. That, I mean, certain of things will do it, others are just.
Well, some are ordinances, some are procedures, and some are money. They have to appropriate some money to make it better.
And some are suggestions for the good of the order, you know,
Yep.
just for how to be a better body. you know?
Yeah, I was gonna say. One of our members went on record to say.
Challenge you to a push-up practice.
All do exercise.
Treadmill.
Jane, I just want to add, I think it's really important to make sure that after your introduction of what the purpose is, that the principles have become very clear to the public that's come and testified that they like the principles that were established. And then go from the principles to the 9 basic categories. And then I think you're good. And then if they want to ask questions about any specific things, fine.
Perfect.
And then we'll all talk about it at dinner at Andy's place.
I'm also,
And now he'll have to invite all of us.
Exactly. It's a secret, but it's a
I'm
big
also
secret.
going to talk about you guys. And just to say that you freely gave a ton of time and that you bring a variety of experience to this question that they are lucky to have the breadth of this community at this table.
Would you want to know, my parents eventually married. I think that counts for something. No.
I didn't know.
No, a lot of people don't, Arliss.
Now we do.
Okay, perfect. So you'll get an email and the final
Yes, it
version.
is.
Thank you, everybody.
Jennifer,
Thank you,
See
thank you,
Tuesday.
thank you.
I'm sure the
And ma'am, thank you so much.
Okay,
Thank you, Jennifer.
we're about
Thank
ready to
you.
wrap up, and sorry you had to listen to that last little bit.
Do you have any words of advice to us?
For Tuesday night?
I mean, I think you'll be fine. It will be a long evening and there will be a lot of people there, so probably, short and concise is the best,
Yes, ma'am.
but I think you're good. And thank you all for all of your work.
You guys are probably staying.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Jennifer. We really
Jennifer.
appreciate your calling in.
Dan, just today.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye. This meeting is adjourned.